This is Moments with Mary, and my guest today is Greg Martin, Bridgewater's veteran agent. Thank you, Mr. Martin, for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
So I understand that you are yourself a veteran. So what military were you in?
I was in the Army. I served initially active duty. I served after high school. I graduated from high school in 1991. Went directly into the Army. Served as a paratrooper in the 82nd Airborne Division, where I served for 3 years. At the end of that 3-year enlistment, I sort of saw some, maybe bigger and better things for myself. As much as I enjoyed doing what I was doing, thought that I would like to get off active duty and go pursue something else, which I did. But I liked the military enough that I wanted to stay engaged, and so I joined the Massachusetts Army National Guard. That was in 1995. And I served in the Army National Guard for another 17 years, so 20 years total. It was in that 17-year period that 9/11 happened, and the deployments and the operational tempo was much different than it was obviously before 9/11. Where I did 2 tours in Iraq. I deployed to Iraq in 2003, really at the beginning of the war, Iraqi freedom. And then went back again in 2009, which was kind of at the end, which was a much different mission in transitioning things back to the Iraqis. So 20 years total in the service, retired as a first sergeant with the military police.
Wow. Well, thank you for your service.
You're welcome.
So how did you go from that to become a veterans agent?
That's how much time do we have, Mary? So, without getting really too much into my life story, I guess, when I got off active duty, I pursued my education. I got a degree at Bridgewater State University in computer science. Graduated in 2000 and really started my career, my civilian career at that point, which was in parallel with my service in the Army National Guard at the time, back in 2000. So I worked for a company called EMC Corporation. It's a technology company. I had a degree in computer science, so worked in technology. Dell, who everybody's heard of. Most people haven't heard of EMC. It was actually a really big company in Massachusetts. Dell bought EMC for $67 billion. So it just, people say, I've never heard of that company. And you say, well, it was just a small Massachusetts company out of Hopkinton that Dell bought for $67 billion.
Wow.
So, big company, Fortune 100 company. Dell bought EMC. Things changed a little bit for me at that time, in terms of my responsibilities, my career. But I ended up working for what was Dell for 24 years, which was up until last year. I was a global director. I had teams in different parts of the country, in the Far East, in Malaysia, in China, in India, and then in Europe, and then in other parts of the United States. So I did a lot of traveling, a lot of collaboration around the world, and really a tremendous amount of experience, life experience that I had in my role as a civilian. But it just started to get to the point where I wasn't quite as excited about it anymore. And sort of the global nature of what I was doing, I really wanted to kind of get back to my roots. I wanted to, and what I was thinking at the time was, maybe I'll do something similar, but local. I'll get back to working for a company that's, in Massachusetts. We were working from home, working remotely through COVID, and then after COVID, getting back into the office. But I found that I was doing much of the same thing in the office as what I was doing from home, and it just wasn't exciting me anymore. So I was pursuing some local opportunities, and then this position opened up in the town of Bridgewater. My predecessor, Roddy Walsh, decided to retire after I think he was here for about 14 years. He worked in a part-time capacity in the role. It really needs to be a full-time role. I recognized that as a veteran in this community over that period of time. I didn't have too much correspondence with Roddy. But, I did work in doing some volunteer work at the senior center. And that's where I became aware that this position was opening up through Emily, who was the director over there. She said, "You should do this job." And I thought, geez, that's quite a bit different from what I'm doing today. And really kind of evaluated the whole situation, obviously looking at things from a financial standpoint and saying, is this something that really I can afford to do? And fortunately, talking to my wife about it, we said, I think that this is good for my own personal well-being and in terms of doing something that I really want to do, something that's going to be rewarding, something that I can give back to the veterans of the community. And I just feel, even to this day, really blessed to have had the opportunity to be able to make that decision and
You
to do it.
never know who's going to speak into your life and give you an idea, do you?
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
The veterans really needed. I started listening on the town council, and they really, really needed a leader. So I'm really glad that you're here. So let's talk about some of the programs you started since you've been here. One of the first ones that I'm aware of was the POW-MI flag flown in a ceremony.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't flown, and I don't know how long.
Yeah, it's interesting because the academy building was renovated, right? The academy building, for all intents and purposes, is our White House, right?
Yeah.
It's our town hall. I know it's not the town hall, which causes some confusion when people say, you work in the town hall. Well, actually, the town hall's across the street. This is the academy building.
My grandson does jokes about that, the little one.
Yeah.
Telling, go to the town hall, and the person standing in front of the town hall, but not the academy building.
Yeah.
He thinks it's funny, yeah.
It's just a big vacant building.
Yeah, he does a good comedy skit on that.
I'll have to listen to that
Yeah.
one because maybe I can reuse it because, I'm looking out the window seing people wandering around the town hall looking for my office.
Yeah.
I'm sort of a de facto member of the Veterans Council, which I know you've attended the Veterans Council on occasion. And it was in the early days, probably one of the first meetings that I was at, somebody mentioned the POW flag. And I think it was around, we were approaching September. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the third Friday in September is POW-MIA, National POW-MIA Recognition Day. And somebody acknowledged that, brought it up, and said, why don't we raise the POW flag at the Academy building? I thought that's a great idea. And, and then we started to talk about, why isn't the POW flag there now?
Yeah.
It should have been there already. Certainly it was an oversight. And it was just something, it was a wrong that we wanted to make right. So we went through sort of the legislative process. There's a flag policy in the town of Bridgewater that we've all become well familiar with since then. It became somewhat of a controversy, I guess you could say. And, I got to the point where I didn't even want to talk about it anymore because I was finding myself really distracted from my mission of helping veterans. And I had to continue to remind myself, you're here to help veterans. You're here to help veterans. Don't get caught up in the politics of flags and, who wants what flag. It's important, but it's not as important as the mission to help veterans.
Well, our council can chew gum and walk at the same time, so
Yes.
we'll deal with that stuff. But we're getting places with it. So then you did the Purple Heart Project. So you did the flags, the signs, and the ceremony. That was quite a event that we had.
Yeah, and I'm glad you called it the Purple Heart Project because it started off as just a conversation, and we said, much like the POW flag, that sort of turned into a little bit of a project. And I don't know if it was me that brought it up, but Bridgewater was already a Purple Heart town.
Yeah.
And I didn't really understand at that time what that meant to be a quote-unquote Purple Heart town. Did a little bit of research on it. There's a national organization called the Military Order of the Purple Heart. I don't know if they're the authority on tracking and ensuring that if towns are going to declare themselves as a Purple Heart town that they maintain that. But certainly on their website it shows state by state, city by city, and Bridgewater's right there. Bridgewater's a Purple Heart town. And I thought, well, that's interesting. You drive into Halifax, you drive into Rainham, you drive into Whitman, you drive into maybe East Bridgewater, I'm not sure, but you see the Purple Heart town, Purple Heart signs. And I thought, geez, there's no signs coming into Bridgewater. So this might be just as simple as, hey, let's put signs up. Let's acknowledge that recognition. And then it grew, and we said, well, we can do the signs. And Lisa Curley, who is very well known throughout the town, she does a tremendous amount for this town. She oversees the 4th of July committee and raises over $50,000 year after year, every single year, does a phenomenal job. She oversees some nonprofit organizations. One of them is called Angels in America. And she said, why don't we use my nonprofit? We'll raise the money for the signs. Any additional money that we raise, we can kind of put forward for, maybe a ceremony of some sort. And we said, so the idea evolved.
Yeah.
And so we raised the money. We bought the signs. I worked with the DPW. The DPW put up 12 signs coming into town.
I saw that. It was nice to see.
It's nice. Yeah. And every so often I drive by a section of town that I haven't driven by yet. And
I put that there. Right?
Yeah, say, I didn't know. Okay, there's one there. That's a nice spot.
It is.
So you'll see the signs around town. And then somebody came up with the idea, why don't we do yard signs? We can we can really raise awareness, which was the primary purpose of what we wanted to do. But maybe we can raise a few dollars too to help support the event and the project. So we've got yard signs, and I don't know.
You got one right there.
Yeah, I said, you know what? This is a plug here. So we still do have some more yard signs. That we're selling for $20, and our cost on these is like, I think, $15. So we're making like $5 a sign. But again, the more important thing is that we want to see it.
So they can contact you to get one.
They can contact me.
Okay.
Yep, contact me directly, and we can. I'll deliver you the sign. We've got Venmo. It's super easy, and really, again, the objective is to get the signs around town.
But if they don't want to use Venmo, and I hear a lot of residents, they can come in, give you a check.
They can give me cash. They can give me a check. It goes right into the goes right to the Angels in America nonprofit. We raised the flag, as you know, so we had a ceremony last week. So putting the signs up coming into town, the yard signs is another component, and then of course the ceremony itself.
You had a nice turnout.
It was beautiful.
Yeah, the police and the fire really showed up.
It was really nice, and being able to recognize Lieutenant Jack Hennessy, whose grandfather was a Purple Heart recipient. Yeah. He's told me that story. It's an incredible story. And then having some of our living Purple Heart recipients there.
Yeah, it was nice to recognize them.
It was really nice, and they certainly appreciated it, and their loved ones, and it was nice to see the community turn out. And by the way, I had it on my first thing to mention here, to thank you for all of your support for the veterans. And you have been, everybody says, let me know what you need, and I greatly appreciate every counselor, and everybody is super supportive. But you've stepped up. You've stepped forward. You've shown up to the Veterans Council meetings. Yeah. You've sponsored legislation, and I'm sure we'll talk about some of the other things as well. But
I know how important it is to support the veterans.
I appreciate that, and the veterans appreciate it.
So it's close to my heart. Yeah. So the other thing you did, you brought the Memorial Day Parade back, and you've done the placements of the flags, and you fixed the medals. Because me and my grandson, one of my grandsons needed volunteer time, so he came with me. We were shocked that a lot of the medals and stuff weren't. So you saw all that, and now you're working to fix that.
Mary, when you say the medals, what
when they say, because when we were looking for to see who was, it wasn't the ones on the graves.
Okay.
But the medals next to them.
Oh, right. Yes. So, so the Memorial Day Parade came back last year.
Yeah, it was a great turnout.
It was great. It was really fantastic, and that was really a nice introduction for me, because I had started in the role just the month prior.
Yeah.
So we were right on the heels of preparing for Memorial Day, and I came in and said, what are we doing? They said, well, we haven't had a Memorial Day Parade in at least a few years, whatever it was. I said, why not? And there was no real good answer, right? There was COVID, certainly that had an impact. So there's no reason why we can't have a Memorial Day Parade. Let's do it. So we put it together. We got all of the support from the CERT team, from the police department, fire department, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, all of the different participants, the VFW, and had a really nice turnout. And typically the Memorial Day ceremony is a little bit more subdued than what we see for Veterans Day, and maybe we'll talk about that at some point. But the Veterans Day Parade was fantastic as well. But it was it really gave us some momentum. And you could really see a bit of a spark there.
You could see how needed you were.
Yes.
The town really needed a leader with the veterans. Yeah.
Yes. And it was great for me to get that, because I can feed on that energy. And when I'm out at the ceremony and people are coming up to me afterwards and saying, thank you, this was great, it's just really good positive reinforcement. And certainly
it motivates you to keep going.
It does.
Yeah.
It does. The town is thirsting for, kind of this leadership, I guess you could say.
Yeah. And we're right in May, so we're going to be doing the flags again and the parade.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to that. So talking about parades, we had the Veterans Parade. You did that really well. What was the motto of the motto?
The motto, it was "Let us serve them."
I like that.
Yeah.
That was, let them.
Yeah.
So them was the veterans because they
That's right.
served us.
That's right.
I really like that. I thought that was really good.
Yeah,
But we're not having it in the town this year, right?
that's right. It's in West Bridgewater, I think. That'll be in November.
Now, do residents from other towns show up at these parades?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yep. It's the Tried. So the Veterans Day Parade, not to be confused with the Memorial Day Parade.
No, the Veterans.
The Veterans Day Parade, which will be in November, is what they call the Tri-Town Parade. So that's the Bridgewaters: East Bridgewater, West Bridgewater, and Bridgewater,
Yeah.
and it rotates every year. And it just so happened that my first year
Yeah.
on the job, it was in Bridgewater, and we did a lot of things a little bit different. Tried to, kind of organize things a little bit better and make sure that we have everybody on the same page, and it went really well. It was
It
a
really
nice
did. It was
turnout.
well organized. I like that you had the older veterans and nice cars and stuff like that. And you thought about how to bring them back, to their cars or family. It was well thought out.
And I'll tell that was the highlight. That was
Yeah.
the highlight. Seeing Mr. Freyer and Mr. Levy, Mr. Freyer, they were both our grand marshals, and just the absolute highlight of the event.
Yeah.
And on my Facebook page, I still have that picture of Mr. Freyer in the back of the Lincoln Continental, in the convertible, and seeing him with that World War II hat on.
Yeah, it's
and
amazing.
There's only like 3 left in town, and if you think about it, and the surviving World War II veterans, you really have to have been born by 1928. Right. So if you think about it, the war ended in 1945.
Yeah.
If you were born in 1928, that means that in 1945 you were 17 years old. So, if you were born after 1928, you're probably not a World War II veteran. You might have been, kind of post occupation and that sort of thing. But it's 2025, right? These veterans are coming up on 100 years old.
Wow.
I just saw Mr. Freyer this morning at the men's breakfast at the senior center. He's, I think, 97 or 98. So he was amongst those veterans who were born in like 1928. He was in right at the end of the war. We've got another veteran in town who's our oldest veteran in town, Mr. Sudhalter, Dr. David Sudhalter. He's 98 years old.
Wow.
Same situation. He was in kind of towards the end of the war.
Yeah.
But
Strong
being able to
wills.
recognize them is just
because they
a
don't
highlight.
always get recognized
No.
anymore. So you started the social hour for the veterans?
Yeah.
So you've had the breakfast and then you just had like lunch.
Yeah, sort of dinner. Yeah,
Dinner, yeah, okay.
yeah. So that's another project.
I like that project.
It's great, and I talk about it a lot, and I try to talk about it somewhat succinctly. That it's really our strategy is, I describe it as kind of a trifecta or threefold strategy, where first and foremost we want to bring veterans together in a social environment, and we have objectives that we want to accomplish by doing that. We want veterans to meet other veterans, collaborate with other veterans, meet me, and have the opportunity to know who I am, and maybe if they just have some basic questions at those events, that's great. But more importantly, let's get together.
Yeah.
Let's meet.
Socialization is very important.
It is, and the number one sort of priority in terms of engagement is to get to that point where I can have a one-on-one session with a veteran or with a widow, a surviving spouse, and just get to understand what is their situation, and then what are the benefits that they're eligible for, what are the benefits they need, what are the benefits they're eligible for, and then how do we connect those dots. So number one, veteran engagement is with the monthly event strategy. Number two, engaging with local businesses. Every business in town you go talk to. Will you do something to help veterans? 100%. Everybody's going to say, absolutely. What can we do? So engaging with local businesses. And then thirdly, engaging with local nonprofits. And those are the sponsors of the event. So I'm not going to businesses and looking for a free handout.
Yeah.
I'm saying if we can leverage your venue, these are small businesses. They can't afford to come in and feed 50
So you've
veterans.
done two. So who are the two businesses?
So Cafe Madeline. We've done Cafe Madeline twice. And no sooner does the event end, where the the owners are saying, when's the next one? And the veterans are saying, when's the next one? And then, throughout the week, people hear about it and say, hey, I didn't know about it. When's the next one? So Cafe Madeline has been fantastic. So again, it's this win-win situation, right, where we expose these businesses in a really positive light because they're doing things for veterans. We expose these nonprofit organizations in a very positive light. And, when somebody comes knocking on your door and saying, will you donate to the Police Association or the Greater Bridgewater Women of Today, they're doing great things for the community. Yeah. And so that's that trifecta that I talk about.
So where'd you have supper?
So we did at the Riv, known as the Riv. I think everybody, but it's the Riviera Cafe and Brew House on Route 18. Towards the East Bridgewater line. Yeah. Fantastic venue. The owners, father and son, George, and the last name escapes me, but the father is a veteran, lives in East Bridgewater. I've had some conversations with him. But that was just a fantastic venue. We had a beautiful night. We had over 50 veterans that came for that event.
You think they're more available in the evening, but then in the winter they wouldn't want to go out at night?
Maybe, but so the intent there is, okay, we've done a couple of these events for coffee. Not every veteran can come out at 10 a.m. on a Wednesday.
That's true.
So we said, look, how do we expand this and we can get more age demographics involved? Yeah. And said, let's do some events at night.
That was good.
Yeah, and we are, and hopefully this doesn't come as a surprise to Paul from Black Hat. He and I have had conversations. We want to do an event at Black Hat. I would like to do something in June. That's not confirmed yet, but maybe you heard it here first. Mark, sometime in June, we're going to coordinate a date at the new tap room at Black Hat.
Oh, that's beautiful. I went there.
Yeah,
for the opening. They did such a beautiful.
It's beautiful.
It is beautiful.
And they do so much. He does so much for the veterans. I know that it's not going to be a problem for us to find a date in June. Yeah. We've talked about it. We were going to do something, kind of in the fall, winter, but they were doing their renovations. He said, let's wait till the spring. We're not going to do an event in May because we're kind of tied up planning the Memorial Day ceremony. But yeah, stay tuned. We'll do that in June. I'm open to ideas for other venues. We've got the indoor golf place in town, Champions Golf. I'd like to do something there. We've got claying around, just claying around, doing something every option's on the table. These are small businesses. Let's promote them. Let's bring veterans together, and let's get the sponsorship and go do it.
I think that's fun doing interactive things, too.
It is.
Just not meeting. And it kind of breaks the ice where you can talk to each other.
Yep.
So why is it important for to retire the U.S. flag, and what's the ceremony?
So I'm glad you said the word retire, because I saw somebody reference that ceremony as a flag burning ceremony.
Yeah, that's not good.
And I thought, it's not really a flag burn. It's a flag retirement ceremony. And that was just yesterday, the day before. And I said, no, it's not a flag burning. We're respectfully retiring the flag. When a flag becomes worn, unserviceable, that flag should not be taken down and stuffed in the corner in your basement for the rest of your life, or in the attic in a box. That flag has served its time. That flag is representative, obviously, of many things, and most importantly, those who have given their lives and paid that ultimate sacrifice. So we should treat the flag with the utmost dignity and respect. And when it is finished serving its life, it should be retired respectfully. And that respectful retirement consists of burning the flag. But it's not a quote-unquote flag burning, because that has a different connotation, right?
That's true.
So on Flag Day, which is in June, the Vets Club, not to be confused with the VFW or any other veterans organization, the Vets Club over by Legion Field hosts that ceremony. The Boy Scouts do a tremendous job at helping to facilitate that. We usually have some representation from the clergy, from either Father Bill from St. Thomas or Father Bacon. They'll do a prayer and a ceremony and so forth. And it's an educational opportunity, too, where the Scouts will go through the importance of what they're doing, the procedure of what they're doing, and kind of that respectful and somewhat somber ceremony.
Now, will you post that so if citizens wanted to go, they could go?
Absolutely.
Oh, okay.
Yes, more communication to come on that for June.
So you did bring up the importance of veterans and surviving spouses meet with you. And I realized that you're called a VSO. What is that?
VSO. So this role has a few different names, I guess, but
Yeah.
VSO being most common, Veteran Service Officer.
Okay.
Interestingly, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, since the Civil War, since the 1860s, instituted a law under Mass General Law, Chapter 115, which sort of dictates my job. The Commonwealth of Massachusetts, after the Civil War, said, we will take care of our war dead, we will take care of the families of our war dead, and we will do so by instituting this law that, amongst other things, says that every municipality, every city or town in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, which there are now 351 of them, shall be represented by a veteran service officer. So Bridgewater has a
Good for
1-to-1.
Massachusetts.
It's great. It's the
Yeah.
only state that has
I thought I
taken
read that.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure, yeah.
And so I'm one of about 200 or so veterans agents. Not every town has a 1-to-1 relationship with veterans agents. Some towns form districts. You think of the Cape, for example, right? Like Truro,
Yeah.
Eastham, Provincetown. They don't need a 1-to-1 veterans agent.
Yeah.
So the Cape, for example, is a district. So all of the Cape, with the exception of Falmouth, falls under a district. And
We
they have a
almost
few.
did that here with Raynham.
We did.
I'm glad we didn't because I knew we had a lot of veterans. in
Yeah,
Bridgewater.
I am too.
Yeah.
I am too.
That's a
I
different role.
it's it creates some economy of scale, but I think it also it probably creates some contention too. I live in Bridgewater,
Yeah.
so I'm a little bit maybe selfish in that regard. I want to help people in Bridgewater. I want to help
Yeah.
veterans in Bridgewater. It's not to say I don't want to help veterans in Rainham. Certainly, if that time ever came, I would do that. But being able to focus on Bridgewater is really important.
Yeah, because you don't really know how much needs there are between the veterans and then their surviving spouses.
Yeah.
So I'm glad we did that.
Well, Mary, real quick, because you said that the spouses, it's you think of the veterans agent helping the veterans.
Yeah.
It's the surviving spouses too. And
They have no idea.
They have no idea. And we did add, I worked with the town clerk's office for the census this year, and we added a checkbox in there if you are a widow or widower
Oh, what a good
of
idea.
a veteran. And so now I have visibility into that because I get the census information from the town clerk's office, so I can see all the veterans. And according to the federal census, there are about 1,500 veterans in Bridgewater.
Wow.
Which is pretty densely populated when you look at that as an overall percentage of the population relative to our surrounding communities. Middleborough's pretty densely populated with veterans as well, but relative to the state, we're about 50% more densely populated with veterans than
Wow.
the state average. I think our percentage was over 7%. I haven't looked at this in a while, but I did do a lot of this analysis early on, whereas across the Commonwealth, it's more like 4.5%. So when you look at the difference between those two things, we have about 50% more
Yeah.
veterans relative to our population. That doesn't include those widows,
No.
those widowers. And they're eligible for in many cases, eligible for benefits that they're just not aware of.
Well, what a good idea to put that on the census.
Yeah.
Really good idea.
Yeah.
So I'm not really sure, so I'm asking, what's the difference between the Veterans Club and the VFW Post 2125? It confuses me. I have no idea.
Yeah, you and about 28,000 other citizens
Yeah.
in this town. Like, they refer to the building over there as the VFW. So the VFW, I'll start with that. That's the Veterans of Foreign Wars Post 2125. That's the James Oliver Post. James Oliver is one of our hometown heroes that was killed in World War I in France. The bridge in front of the Home Depot is the James Oliver VFW Post 2125 bridge. So we can talk more about that at some point. But the VFW is a organization, a nationally recognized organization. I think everybody has probably heard of the VFW.
Oh, yeah.
The criteria to be a member of the VFW is that you are, in fact, a veteran of foreign war. So there's a whole set of criteria. It's almost a distinguished group within the veteran community, I guess you could say, in that not every veteran would be eligible for membership of the VFW. It's only those veterans who served in
war.
war campaigns.
Oh, okay. Because I was going to say, did we have any? We didn't. Besides the Civil War, we never had a war within our country.
Not
So
within.
that's why I got confused. Because
Yeah,
when you said foreign, so they actually have to be in war.
that's right.
Oh, certainly.
That's right.
Okay.
And there's a lot of, kind of loose criteria, where some people don't maybe not think of quote unquote war. I think, there's some nuance to it where, service members who served in Guantanamo Bay in Cuba in support of Operation Enduring Freedom are eligible. Service members who still serve in the demilitarized zone in South Korea are eligible. So there's kind of some broad eligibility. So I don't want to put it out there and suggest that you had to have served in Vietnam or Iraq or Afghanistan. If anybody out there is interested in joining the VFW, please come and see me. I'm a member, and we can get you signed up. So that's the VFW. The VFW is on Orange Street over by Bernier's Liquor, and that's on that part of town, Pratt Town. It's actually, interestingly, housed in a town building. So the VFW leases that building from the town. That building is one of, I think it was 9 or 11 schoolhouses that were around town in the 1800s. That's one of 2 remaining schoolhouses that still exist today.
Wow.
That building was built in 1855. So it's an old schoolhouse. It's had some add-ons and renovations. We've got a kitchen and in a bathroom, a men's room and a woman's room, which wasn't there in 1855. So that's the VFW.
Right.
Great organization. So again, if anybody out there is interested, please let me know. The Vets Club is a private club. I might butcher the story a little bit here, but I'll give it at a very high level. I believe it was post-World War II. There were a lot of World War II veterans in town that said, we would like to have some establishment. They raised money and they purchased all that land where Legion Field is and where the Vets Club is today. And the building itself, the Vets Club, was a building in Weymouth. And Dave Moore was just telling me a little bit about this the other day because I've heard bits and pieces of the story and I've read the story. But they disassembled this building in Weymouth, and I forget what the purpose of the building in Weymouth was, and then transported it to Bridgewater and rebuilt it. And this was, probably sometime in maybe like the late 40s, 50s. It was post-World War II.
See, they reused stuff back then, huh?
Oh, yeah. I mean, and I was actually in the attic of that building just the other day because we were getting the Hometown Hero banners for the town common. And, a lot of history there. So that's a private club. And they have veterans, obviously, that are members. I'm a member over there. And then they have social members. So you don't have to be a veteran to be a member at that club.
Okay.
And obviously they've got a function hall and they've got a bar. They've got a lot more resources there than what the VFW has over on Orange Street.
Yeah.
But it's a good club. It's a good watering hole, I guess you could say. You can go in there and get a beer for $3 and play the dice on the Yahtzee, and it's like a 50-50 thing. And there's some good folks over there. So
they serve a good breakfast. I've been there for their breakfast.
Oh, really?
Yes.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, they have that event where I think it's the veterans.
Okay.
They do the breakfast. It's really good.
Okay.
It's worth the money, definitely. So I saw that the memorial on a memorial on the Common, it has World War I, World War II, Vietnam, Korea, and Global War on Terrorism. I didn't know we named that war. That's Afghanistan and Iraq. That's what we named that war?
Yep.
And it's, wow, I
The
didn't know
Global
that.
War on Terror, also referred to as GWAT.
GWAT.
GWAT, yeah. Most people
Interesting.
probably wouldn't be familiar with that. From the military, there are awards and so forth that are, the Global War on Terror Expeditionary Medal, for example, would be somebody who served in that armed conflict. Global War on Terror Service Medal would be somebody who served during that conflict. But yeah, GWAT. I wasn't around when they decided how they were going to engrave that, because that was an add-on to that memorial.
Yeah.
Because so as you said, there's a World War I memorial. That's the memorial that is facing the flag on the south side of the Common.
Yeah, it's the shorter one, like almost look bricks-like. Because this one has the taller one that's kind of like blackish.
Yeah, the
tint
black
to it.
one is I think more generically referred to as the War Memorial, because that
Okay.
encompasses everything
All the
since
wars.
World War I. So that black monument is World War II, the Korean War, the global war on terror, in Vietnam.
Yeah.
And the names on that memorial are the names of the veterans who gave their lives. And the global war on terror, I would say, unfortunately, we have a name on there.
Yeah.
Fortunately, there's only one relative to the others, but that's Kevin Preach. Kevin Preach was killed in Afghanistan.
But it doesn't
in
cover all
US
the
Marines.
men that got wounded.
No,
There's a lot.
There's a lot.
Yeah.
Yep, there's a lot. They wouldn't be depicted on there. Interestingly, I had a widow approach me at the Purple Heart ceremony, and she asked about. So her husband was a Purple Heart recipient in Vietnam. He has since passed away. Stanley Kravitz was his name, and some of the townspeople would be familiar with that name. He was involved in I don't know if he was a town council. I didn't personally know him, but most people around town that have been around for a long time do. Very influential figure in town. But Vietnam service, Purple Heart recipient. When a veteran dies, there's a determination as to whether or not their death was service connected. In other words, if I were to think about this specifically about Vietnam veterans, if you served in Vietnam, if a service member served in Vietnam or in the coastal waters around Vietnam, in the Navy, for example, they are presumed to have been exposed to Agent Orange.
Yeah.
I think most people have heard of Agent Orange. It's a carcinogen toxin. It was used as an exfoliant in the jungle. And everybody was exposed to it in some way, shape, or form, some more than others. And there are a whole list of presumptive conditions associated with this, different types of cancer, type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, et cetera. If a veteran that served in Vietnam is diagnosed with any of those things, it is presumed that those conditions are as a result of their service.
Yeah.
In other words, service-connected conditions. And so if they come and see me, we can do the paperwork necessary to get them not just the compensation for it, but the recognition for it. Because, we're all going to die at some point, right? If that service member dies as a result of any of those conditions, that becomes a service-connected death.
Okay.
And as a result of that, if they leave behind a spouse or any dependents, then they would be eligible for some VA benefits, what's called Dependency Indemnity Compensation, or DIC. It's a survivor benefit. So it brings up 2 points, right? One point I want to emphasize is that if you're a service member out there, Vietnam, and even there are other things with respect to the global war on terror, Iraq, Afghanistan, the burn pits, it's all part of what's called the PACT Act. There are presumptive conditions out there that they may be eligible for some compensation. But as importantly, or maybe even more importantly, especially when you talk to some of these Vietnam guys, they'll tell you definitively they're going to die before their wife, right?
Yeah.
Whether or not they do is yet to be determined, but they're convinced that they're going to die before their spouse, and they want to make sure that their spouse is taken care of.
Yeah.
So just as an example, I have a Vietnam veteran. He is 100% service-connected for a variety of issues, and he's in failing health. He has dementia, but he has high blood pressure. He has hypertension. He's not service-connected for that. So in other words, the VA has not acknowledged that is a service-connected disability. It's in his medical record that he has hypertension. I work with his wife. I said, let's file a claim to get him service-connected for hypertension, because when he dies, if he dies, heart disease is the leading cause of death, right? So if somebody dies and they die from anything associated with heart disease, hypertension will be a contributing cause to that death.
Yeah.
And that will be then a service-connected death. So again, people don't think of these things.
They need to talk to you about it.
That's the important thing. Come and talk to me, because we can evaluate the situation.
Like in Afghanistan and Iraq, they've been not only exposed to stuff, but lots of times if you lose limbs, you don't live as long. Yeah. You know what I mean? Because you're not up walking, and you know what I mean. So that could maybe be used too.
Absolutely, yeah, and those are things that are, so you have secondary conditions, for example, right? So let's go back to, in my case with the Vietnam and Agent Orange and presumptive conditions. Type 2 diabetes is one of those presumptive conditions. So many elderly people develop type 2 diabetes. Well, there are secondary issues associated with that, like neuropathy, right? The numbness of the extremities, feet, hands, etc. Those become secondary conditions. So if the veteran is service connected for type 2 diabetes, and then they develop these other issues that are secondary to that, then we can get those service connected as well, and making sure that, they might get to the point where they need a foot amputated or something, right?
Yeah.
And all of that would be taken into consideration by the VA in terms of
glad.
compensation and so forth. So
Yeah.
back to your point, come and see me, right? That's the most important thing.
That's why I wanted to have you on you, because I think it's important to get this information out and keep talking about it, because no one really, you just don't understand. You've served and you think, okay, now, you just go along with your life.
Yeah.
So one of the other things that you fixed at the middle school, everyone was wondering why that memorial was there, and you found the sign. So what's the sign about?
Oh man, that's a good story. That's a good
Good story?
It's a really good story. The Buzz Around Bridgewater did a story on that as well.
Really?
Yeah. So when I came on board last April, I was here for a day, and they said, "Hey, Greg, we got to order the flags for the cemeteries for Memorial Day. We got to order the wreaths." Flowers by Diane does our wreaths. She does a fantastic job. I'll give her a plug here. And she does the wreaths, and she does a lot of things for the veterans around town. So I said, "Well, how many wreaths do we need, and where do they go?" Well, we got 14 wreaths last year. Okay, where do they go? The Scouts do it. So I reach out to the Scouts. Jake Hackett, really good supporter. I said, "Jake, do you have a list of all of the places that you put the wreaths?" He says, "Yeah, let me text it to you." So he sends it over to me, and I'm looking at it, and it says the bridge on Summer Street, the bridge on Vernon Street, the bridge on Route 18, the bridge on Plymouth Street. I'm like, the bridge? What is it? What the memorial site on Mount Prospect at the old high school. So I went on a reconnaissance mission. And drove around town, spent half the day just driving to every single one of these sites. And I was a bit appalled, I think is probably the right word, in the shape of some of these memorials.
Yeah.
Most of the memorials are just signs. And in some cases, the signs were missing. In some cases, the signs were in disrepair. They were crooked. They were faded. In the case of the site in question that you mentioned, the Vietnam Memorial Site at the old high school, I show up there. There's a wreath there from either the prior year or years prior, and there's this dilapidated brick structure with nothing on it. The plaque is missing, right? So I'm looking at this and I'm shaking my head and I'm saying, what is this? What we're putting a wreath here? Nobody knows what it is. Somebody knows what it is, but I nobody can tell me. So I'm like, okay, we're going to get to the bottom of this. Where's the plaque? What was it? And what do we need to do to restore it? So this is going to be easy, right? Because this is in a pretty prominent location. We have a lot of people around this town who have been around this town for a long time that, every graduating class has some, citizens who still live here, right?
Yeah.
So I started off with kind of shaking the tree a little bit. Dave Moore, who's our town historian, I thought for sure Dave will know. Dave had some speculative ideas on what it might be. He thought that it might have been a Vietnam memorial, but he also thought that it might have been a tribute to the people who built the building, back in the 1960s, in the early 60s, like the trustees or something like that. Like there's a plaque at the library that has a tribute to the trustees of the library from 1973 or something. Yeah. And I thought, okay, well, that's kind of disappointing if that's what it is from a veteran's standpoint.
Why would you put a wreath?
Well, that's the question.
Yeah.
Like, okay, why were we putting a wreath to honor the trustees of that built the building, for Memorial Day? So maybe there was some miscommunication along the way, or maybe we just haven't gotten to the bottom of the real story.
Yeah.
So I posted it on the residence page, the Facebook residence page. There's 30,000 people on that page. Yeah. I'm like, for sure, this is going to take like a minute. And my thing's going to blow up, and it's going to say bloop, 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 bloop. I was in the graduating class that donated that. Here are some photos of it. Here's what the plaque said, etc. Crickets. And
it was amazing that no one knew.
No one knew.
Because I was watching it, yeah.
And some more speculation on there. The notion of it being a Vietnam memorial, kind of came up, but nothing definitive, no photos. I was resigned to the point where, because this went on for like 9 months. And one of the ideas I had that somebody suggested was, we have all the yearbooks at the library going all the way back to, whatever. And I was going to just have a volunteer go over and just say, hey, just go start at 1969 and just thumb through every yearbook all the way through the 1980s. And maybe there's a picture in there that says, there's a picture of this thing and we can zoom in on it somehow.
That's a good idea.
And fortunately, it didn't come to that. So coincidentally, one morning, my daughter goes to that school. So I drop her off every morning at the parent drop-off, and it's a big to-do up there. And, so I'm waiting in line to drop her off, and I see two gentlemen out there with tape measures around the monument. And I'm like, what are these guys doing? They know something I don't.
Yeah.
So I drop my daughter off. I find a place to park. I run over. I track them down. One of them was Mark Chaka. He is the superintendent for facilities for the BR school system. And it just so happens his father's a Vietnam veteran, Kevin Chaka, and I'd been working with his dad. And it's not a common name. So I said, Kevin? He's, yeah, that's my dad. So we, me and Mark kicked it off, hit it off right away. I said, what are you doing here with this monument? I've been trying to get to the bottom of this thing. And he says, well, they're going to be rededicating this building. And the name escapes me, but they're rededicating that building to name. I know the council approved it. O'Donohue or something, maybe something like that. Yeah. And I don't know the story, but he's not a veteran, but an influential figure that they're going to name the school for. And they were going to sort of repurpose this monument because it was his understanding that this monument was just this thing that we talked about, like a tribute to the trustees. So I thought, okay, that's not inappropriate, I guess. And that's not my lane anyways to say if you're going to repurpose a monument of some sort. And I told him my plight and I told him my story. I've been trying to get to the bottom of this thing. I was disappointed that it sounds like they've, he's confirmed that this was not a military monument. So I went back about my business, and about an hour later, my phone rings. It's Mark. He says, Greg, we found the plaque.
Really?
We found the plaque. He said, it just was a matter of, talking to the right people. And one of the guys that had worked in facilities for a long time was aware of the fact that the previous facilities director had removed it because it was falling off of the structure. And it was kind of tucked in the corner somewhere. Unfortunately, right? I mean, people can look at it and say, what a disservice that we've done over all of these years to take this thing and stick it in the corner. But it wasn't anybody doing anything malicious or deliberate. It was just around I don't know when it was, but just I'm not pointing blame at anybody on this. I'm just happy that we got to the bottom of it. And so immediately I'm like, I'll be right there. So I go down. He shows me the plaque, and it's clearly a tribute to the veterans who gave their lives that went to that school. So there are a handful of Vietnam veterans who gave their lives. So Stefano D'Amelia had reached out to me previously. Stefano is the brother of Angelo D'Amelia, who was our state representative before Dennis Gallagher.
Yeah.
So Stefano is somebody who's involved around town. He coached my kid in football, so I know him. And he had told me, Greg, when you get to the bottom of this thing, let me know. I'll sponsor, renovations on this. So immediately I call Steph. I said, hey, Steph, can you meet me down there? Let's see what we can do. We meet down there. He says, look, this thing's going to need to be raised. It's irreparable, and we're not going to be able to do anything with it. So he said, okay. We bounced that around and said it's probably going to be best if we start over. We talked to the superintendent. I talked to the town manager, and we have approval to do that. So he's going to take care of all the demolition and site prep. Barnacote Memorials out of Middleborough. Andrew Barnacote is a citizen of Bridgewater, does a tremendous amount for the community with his business. And I found this out, that their business, Barnacote Memorials in Middleborough, has been around since like 1880 or something, he told me.
Wow.
Family business. And he said, Greg, whatever you need, let me know. So
that's
the
great.
ball's in motion on that.
Yeah.
I'm waiting on Barnacote to let me know. He's got some ideas. We're going to do a nice, big, beautiful granite structure that's going to withstand the test of time. The one that's there now just wasn't designed to last probably more than 50 years, being brick, and it absorbs. And so we're going to have a beautiful new structure there. It's probably, maybe we might be able to get something like that aligned for kind of November timeframe. We just got a lot of other pokers in the fire right now. But that's that story, so stay tuned on that.
Yeah, I'm glad you figured it out, because I've heard a lot about it, and everyone's like, we don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you kind of figured it had to be something with the, if they're having the wreaths there.
You would think, yeah.
Yeah.
And then let me finish, Mary, because that's a segue into kind of the broader memorial site sort of project, right? Because that's kind of the Vietnam one is certainly a project in and of itself.
Yeah.
But all of these memorial bridge signs, I brought it up to the Veterans Council and said, I'd like to go talk to the DPW. I'd like to explore opportunities to get these signs fixed, get them replaced. And one of the members of the Veterans Council said, what do you think about an Eagle Scout project? And I thought, Eagle Scout project for this? I'm like, really, we're just procuring signs and dispatching the DPW to go put them up. That's really so. Well, let me go talk to the kid. So they came back with this proposal. Just I get this kid Ben Chase, who took on this Eagle Scout project. Just outside the box. This is the youth of today, thinking of things that you or I, and I come from technology, so maybe I would kind of ponder these things, but intuitively, this is how they think now. It's no longer building a dugout or building a kiosk at a park. I mean, it still is, but it's evolved. He says, "Here's what we're going to do. Here's what we're proposing to do. We're gonna get QR codes, and we're gonna put them on the signs, and we're gonna put together all of this digital content, and we're gonna put it." Online, hopefully, we are going to host it on the town website. And when you go up and you scan that QR code on the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Bridge, it'll bring you right to our town website. It'll talk specifically about that particular memorial site, the Vietnam Veterans of Bridgewater.
That's cool.
And likewise, all of them will have their own unique QR code that will bring you to that information. And this information, I kind of envision this almost like a Wikipedia where it will evolve over time. Because, the Eagle Scout on his quote-unquote build day met with all of the other scouts at the library and they put together this content. But it's pretty basic, right? But we've got a great foundation there. So we're going to expose this to the public once we get all the QR codes deployed and we get everything, set up. So we've got a little bit of work to do still there. But there'll be like a feedback loop that says, hey, you list all the Vietnam veterans that served from Bridgewater. My uncle was from Bridgewater. He's not listed. Here's his information. Okay, cool. We'll review it, and then we can evolve it. We can add it. People have pictures, et cetera. I think it'll be a really good kind of dynamic program that we're going to implement.
And it brings the youth in, too.
Yes.
Aren't you using the Boy Scout or them to get all the names at the cemetery? With the veterans? There was talk about that.
Yeah, so the Boy Scouts do a lot of things. They're probably not going to be too involved in that project, but that's another project where we want to catalog all of the veterans that are buried in town. We have a general idea of the quantity of veterans at each of the 17 cemeteries in town. Some of them only have one veteran. Some of them have 300 veterans. St. Thomas, for example, Mount Prospect. Those are the lion's share of the burials that we have in town. But we want, and so I'm going to use the Veteran Tax Work-Off Program.
Oh, okay. That's a good idea.
For them to come in and it's just kind of a brute force exercise, but it's something that people are excited about because it's a fun project.
Yeah.
So I can send a veteran, even if they have some maybe minor mobility issues, and I can say, hey, just go over to this section of St. Thomas Cemetery and just walk up and down. When you find a veteran's grave, catalog it, take a picture of it, note where it is. And, when you look at those grave markers, those VA grave markers, as small as they are, they're like, probably 2 feet wide by 1.5 feet tall, right? We've all seen them. There's a tremendous amount of information there. We've got obviously name, rank, branch of service, the day they were born, the day they died, obviously, any war campaigns that they served in, any distinguished medals that they received, like if they received a Purple Heart or a Silver Star, oftentimes that would be annotated on there. And we want to get all of that digitized and cataloged so that now, not only do I know that there's 314 veterans buried at St. Thomas Cemetery, I know how many served in the Army, how many served in the Navy, Air Force, Marines, how many World War II veterans, how many Vietnam veterans, how many served in World War II and Korea, et cetera. And then that will drive some of the things that we do. One of the things that we want to do, kind of in relation with that is the flag holders. For the most part, we put the flags right in the ground for Memorial Day every year, and we leave them up for the most part for the year. But those flags don't age well when they're stuck in the ground like that.
No.
But when they're in a flag holder and they're off the ground, and so ideally we want to have a flag holder at every grave. And there's a company I'm working with, and they have, branch of service. And I'm thinking probably branch of service might be good, and say, all right, every veteran will have one of these flag holders there, and those flags will stay. Everything's going to be straight up and down. It's going to be a lot easier to maintain. It'll be nice.
So, saying that you're looking at the names and putting them in the books and stuff, you should talk to like Carlton Hunt.
Yeah,
that's on the that preservation.
I have. Yep,
Yeah.
we've talked to Carlton and Dave Moore. They actually consulted with Ben Chase on the Eagle Scout project.
Okay.
And provided some really good feedback. Yeah.
Yeah, because you really need that. Probably the last question. I don't know. We've been here almost an hour.
Wow.
I know. It goes by quick.
I knew there was. We could do this probably 4 times and still scratch the surface.
You can come back whenever you want. We can keep going. So I noticed that you said 95% of Chapter 115.
Yes.
So this is benefits for veterans, and how do they receive them?
Yeah,
do they come to you?
I'm glad you brought that up, Mary, because I mentioned Chapter 115, Mass General Law, Chapter 115 is what we're referring to there. And it's a comprehensive law, part of which dictates my job and the fact that every Commonwealth shall have a veteran service officer. There are monetary benefits that are available for veterans in need. And part of Chapter 115, as I said, conceptually was to take care of every veteran in the Commonwealth. And that means that a veteran will never be without food, without shelter, without basic life necessities. And Chapter 115 helps to facilitate that. So if there's a veteran that is, financially struggling, they may be eligible for a monetary benefit. It is a stopgap, right? So it's not, so there's what they call a means test for this, where we're going to look at what is your income and what are your assets. And it's got to be pretty low, to be eligible for Chapter 115.
But we have a lot of homeless.
Well, here's my thing. So your question was the 95%. What does that mean? We increased, since I came on board, we've increased our Chapter 115 benefit distribution in the town by 95%.
Oh, good.
But it's still super low relative to our other towns. And these are the conversations I'm having with other VSOs. And when I see, like, for example, I'll give you a specific example, Westport. The Westport VSO was doing some training on Chapter 115 benefits. And in the process of this training, I could see that she had X amount of Chapter 115 recipients in Westport. And I thought, geez, that's like 3X what we have here in Bridgewater. How big's Westport? Westport can't be bigger than Bridgewater. I think when I looked it up, Westport's like half the size. Well, Westport's half the size, and they have 4 times as many veterans on Chapter 115. It's just it's one data point, right? But when I look at East Bridgewater, West Bridgewater's not a good example, but Middleborough, the magnitude of Chapter 115 recipients relative to Bridgewater is much higher. And so I see that as an opportunity. I know for certain that there are veterans out there that are eligible for these benefits. And again, this is where I encourage them to make an appointment, come and see me, because we can evaluate their situation. I'm really proud of the fact that we've increased that by 95%, but it was a really low bar. It was a really low bar that we started with. I think we could easily increase that by another 95% this year.
How do you increase it?
Just through engagement, right? Because what it comes down
95% engagement.
Well, no. 95% increase in the monetary benefit that we put out. The town gets reimbursed 75% of that by the state.
Okay, so that's like tax exempts and stuff like that?
No, it's an actual check that goes out every month. So, for example, when we do that means test, let's say you're a widow of a veteran, and let's say your Social Security is $650 a month, and that's your only source of income.
Yeah.
Of course, you would probably have other things like food stamps and the food pantry and those other things. But if your only source of income is $650 a month, and maybe you live in the housing authority, maybe you have subsidized rent, maybe you live in your house that's paid for, and you're paying the property tax. $650 is not going to do it. We know that.
Yeah.
So you come to me, you're going to be within that means test of eligibility for Chapter 115 benefit. So now you're going to get a check every month from the town of Bridgewater that is reimbursed by the state at 75%. So we increased that distribution of funding by 95% this year.
So that many veterans were that low income and stuff.
They were that
struggling.
low, or there were veterans that were getting the benefit that they weren't getting the entirety of the benefit.
Yeah.
Like
That's
they're
a
eligible
huge
for
impression.
fuel.
Yeah.
It's huge. And so when we talk about engagement, right, the engagement will identify veterans who are eligible for this benefit so that we can then get them onboarded to Chapter 115 so that now they can get this benefit. So that is certainly one of my goals for the next year, is to continue to increase that Chapter 115 distribution.
Yeah, we definitely got to get that word out.
Yeah.
There is one more question that I wanted to ask you, because the Lions Club is looking for ramps because you guys are helping. Is it just the veterans? Because I saw, this gentleman that they helped, he served in 2 wars.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. So, and I saw that they were looking for ramps.
Yeah.
So is it all for the veterans or anybody that needs it?
Anybody that the Lions Club does a phenomenal job. Any ramp you see around town was probably installed by the members of the Lions Club. Certainly, it's the first group I look to when we need ramps. So you mentioned that particular. So that's Bill Labossiere.
Okay.
So many people around town know Bill. He volunteers up at the senior center. I saw him this morning. But he's experiencing some mobility issues with age, and he needed a ramp.
And 2 wars.
Yeah, he
That's
fought.
amazing.
He was in Vietnam, and
He
he
must
was
have
in the
been
Gulf
very
War.
young in Vietnam.
He was
huh?
relatively young in Vietnam, and then one of these guys who stuck it out in the National Guard, and then got called to active duty.
Is there an
for
age
the Gulf.
limit when you're in the National Guard that they call you for duty?
It's typically 60. So 60 would be the age at which you would be required to
Retire.
exit. There are waivers where they might have specialty roles or something where they'll
But
make
if
a
you're
waiver.
in the National Guard, is there a limit of, like say I'm in the National Guard, I'm 55, and the war breaks out?
You go.
You go.
You
Wow.
go. Yep.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah, they typically, I just used to tell people this, that they don't deploy individuals. Typically, they deploy units.
Okay.
So if you are a member of that unit,
You're going.
and that unit gets deployed, you're probably going.
Wow.
Yeah.
I don't think people realize that.
Yeah.
Your grandfather, your father's there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I served when I went to Iraq in 2003. There was a guy that I served with in my unit who was friends with my dad.
Wow.
He was a little bit younger than my dad, but
Yeah.
he was probably at the time pushing 50.
Yeah.
It was like 20 over 20 years ago now, which
Yeah,
is
'cause
crazy.
you never know. I was a grandmother in my 40s, so I would have gone.
Yeah.
Grandma Graff's going to war.
Yeah.
Yeah. I thank you very much for coming.
Thank you,
Anytime that
Mary.
you have something going on, you just, and where you want to bring one of the veterans in with you,
Yeah.
it would be a great podcast.
That would be great.
Yeah.
This was really fun. And this was my first podcast, so thank you.
You're welcome.
And I like the conversational nature of it, and
Yeah, that's
I think
what's
we could
fun.
do this for hours.
Yeah, we could, because we
Yeah.
both love veterans.
Yep.
So, yeah.
Yep.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Anytime.